Sorry.
It's okay. I am the resident artist for Watercolor Snacks, and I am also your instructor. So if we can pan over to the desk here, I'm going to walk us through a little bit of what tonight's session is going to be like. So tonight is really a night to utilize the chat feature, because this is the night for like all kinds of questions. I did post in the mix group, what are some things you want to learn with this box? And somebody mentioned color mixing, because we have a very bright palette with us this quarter. And you can always go more muted with bright colors, but you can't always go the opposite way. So this is why a lot of palettes that you find, like pre-curated palettes you'll find on like art stores and stuff, tend to be bright colors, because there are ways to mute them down. But we're just going to have fun with talking about mixing colors, color wheel, different types of color palettes. I do have a swatch card here of the quarters, swatch card of the quarter for the Carnival box. And I have that off to the side, but I actually had somebody recommend a reverse watercolor. So I figured that we might try that. Now, if you're wondering, like I was, what a reverse watercolor page or what a reverse coloring page is, that's what it is. Reverse coloring page is, most coloring pages you fill in within the lines, you draw within the lines. Reverse coloring page is laying down color and then adding details. And so I figured we'd have some fun with this. Tonight is just going to be about playing around with different things. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I do have all of my paints here. Now, I actually found this. This was already in my studio. This actually worked out perfect. I have a spot here for each color that came in the box. I'm just going to lay them out here. And then in between the colors, there's a space to blend them. So I did 2 drops where you have the main colors. So I did 2 drops of yellow, 2 drops of orange, 2 drops of magenta, damascene purple, and cyan blue. And then within, I just did 1 of each in their cross blends right there. And that's just to let you know what this beautiful chaos is meant to be. But we're going to go ahead and start with just the colors that we got from the box. And we're going to make a couple of color wheels. I say a couple because it's nice to actually have a visual of what the different color palettes look like. So we're going to start with our primaries. And in fact, to start with our primaries, we actually do need to mix a red. You can mix a red by mixing the magenta and the orange, just 1 drop of each. Also, I want to just point out that liquid watercolors make blending so easy. They make mixing colors really easy, because you just drop the same parts or different combinations. So I'm just going to do 1 magenta there and 1 orange. And what this does is it gives us a good red. I'm not going to say it's a true red, because we can't make true red, but by blending these 2, it turns into a faux red. And that's all we need. Well, that's all we need for tonight. We just need a faux red color. So I'm going to just go swatch it right there. Beautiful. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start with our primaries. The primary colors consist of yellow, blue, and red. These are colors we cannot make ourselves. All the other colors you can mix and whatnot. I think white and black are their own little world right there. But we're going to go ahead and start by just making a spot for yellow. Try and go in a circular pattern, but you can do whatever shapes you want. I'm just doing a circle right here for the primaries. I just want it noted, I did pick a lemon yellow, because we have not featured a lemon yellow in Watercolor Snacks yet. So I want you guys to know, if you know me, you know how much I hate yellow. We have a lemon yellow for a change. All right, now this is not the colors that came in the box, because we have our little faux red here, but I'm going to do it anyways, because I want to be able to have the marker to just remember, like, okay, we're dealing with primaries here. Go ahead and make a spot for your red color. If there are questions of how to mix to get certain colors, please feel free to drop those in the chat, because we want to utilize tonight's session for that. We've got our cyan blue here. Now, I did not add any water to my palette, other than just what was on my brush. You'll notice that the color by itself can be really concentrated, and that's okay. And if you want it more diluted, add some more water. And I would say just either add it with a dropper or add it with your brush. So we have a little lopsided trio right there of primaries. I say lopsided there just because my blue is a little bit closer to my yellow and red just kind of out there. All right, and then next what we're going to do is we're going to fill in the cross colors. So what that means is a cross between red and yellow is orange. Now I already have an orange here because we got an orange in the box. So I'm not going to mix the orange. I am going to make this a little square though, to kind of indicate that we've got you know, the mix going on. Like this is a mixed color between the two. And we're going to do the same with the purple because blue and red makes purple. So I'm not actually going to mix our purple because we already have a purple, but I am going to just make it a little square there to indicate that this is a color that would be mixed. And this is really just learning, kind of instilling what the color wheel is in our minds. Following the color wheel is how I mix and how I get colors that I want. When I need, especially working with a limited palette, this is how you get the colors that you want. Is you remember how the color wheel works, and we go from there. And then we're going to mix green, and that one is an actual mixture I had to make, and that's with just the yellow and the cyan blue, lemon yellow and cyan blue, and get this nice rich green color. Yeah. And here we have the starts of our first color wheel. Now, obviously with a color wheel, there's a lot more shades that can go in there. Like we didn't add our magenta in there. And that's okay. That's totally fine. This is just to let us know, like remind us where it's at. So kind of like these color wheels here. Also, for an added bonus, if you ever wanted to get creative with your color wheel, you could do something like this. I was fiddling around with it the other night and decided to try and make it kind of monochromatic, but make flowers. So I had a color wheel and I turned it into flowers, and there it tried to make it monochromatic. So monochromatic is one of those, it's a type of color palette. A lot of you guys are probably familiar with this, but we're going to just go through the basics of it for the sake of knowledge and just saying it out loud here. Monochromatic is a color palette where you are only dealing with one color in different shades. So a monochromatic would be, you know, I've got a shade of, you know, dark, like my cyan blue right here. I don't know if this is a dark blue. Yeah, we're gonna say it's a dark blue. And then I've got my shade of slightly lighter blue, which if you need more palette space, this is where we're gonna, I have a few palettes with me on hand tonight because I've been mixing up a storm. So by adding blue there, there's some water to the blue, I mean, we're gonna start to dilute that down. Now it's just one color, but doing different shades, it makes it monochromatic. We can do one more. Let's see how light we can go. Oh, that's nice and light. Now, by mixing this dioxazine purple and this cyan blue together, it actually makes a type of Payne's gray, not Payne's gray, ultramarine color. At least when I have worked with it. It's a bit more purpley. But if that's the case, you can just add a little bit more blue. But it does come out to be just a little bit more ultramarine, which I was not expecting. Not until I was playing around with it. There we go. Now, even though these are different ends of the spectrum for blue colors, this is still counts as monochromatic. Having an ultramarine blue and a cyan blue, this still counts as an monochromatic. There we go. I'm mixing up my words here. A monochromatic color palette. And here we are going to just kind of lighten it out. And we're going to do one more to see just how light you can go. And there is what a monochromatic palette is. It's just the same, it's just working all in one color. All right, I'm going to go ahead and give you a moment. I'm going to take some water. Weather's getting warm, so stay hydrated. CMYK often used in printing is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. You can replace red with magenta for a base that's similar to the primaries and have enough to get all the colors you need. Excellent, Laurelyn. Thank you. I knew that about CMYK, but I did not know how to explain that. So thank you for sharing that. And that works because we have a magenta. Actually, whenever I first laid down the cyan color, I thought this looks like the CMYK combination. So that's awesome.
Bria, I think that was from Jessica. I'm guessing Jessica has a printing background.
My bad. Thank you, Jessica. Thanks for catching that, Lee. I think I think Laurelyn's name was above that. So
no worries, no worries.
Easy mix up, but thank you for sharing. So the next that we have is a complementary color palette. And what this is, complementary or contrasting, I think either one works. And basically, this is where you start to follow your color wheel. So by drawing a line to connect all of your colors, you start to get a circle going, which is why it's called the color wheel. And by going to the opposite end of the spectrum, there is where you find your complementary color palettes. Because purple, it will always be the opposite of yellow, red will always be the opposite of green, blue is the opposite of orange, and so on. And what that does is it allows you to blend your colors if you want to start to mute them down. So we're going to start by laying down our sunny yellow. I'm just going to do a little circle for yellow. And then we're going to do one for purple. Now this dioxazine purple, any dioxazine purple, in my experience, is super powerful. So you only need a little bit. Oh, we can do a little bit more. All right. And now what we're going to do is on a palette, we're going to combine the two and see what color we get. Now, remember that because dioxazine purple is so powerful, you might need to lean a little bit more into the yellow just to have the contrast be balanced. I only need, oh no, I need more purple than that. All right. Now it doesn't look like much. It looks kind of gross as far as a color goes. But I assure you this is important because this is how you start to get more neutral tones. You'll see how bright those two colors are, and we just made this neutral brown shade right there. It looks kind of dark and blech, but that's because it's yellow and purple. It can have that effect. Oftentimes you'll lean more into one or the other. Oftentimes if I'm looking for like a parchment kind of color or a titanium buff, I will mix a yellow color with the faintest hint of purple to dull it down just a little bit. We're going very, very tiny bit of purple. I don't think that was tiny enough, but we're going to go ahead and just apply this to the sheet just to kind of show what you can get. So we got a little bit more of a purpley neutral tone, but in order to tone down that purple, I add a little bit of yellow to it. Now we're going to see what happens when we add a bit more yellow. Be a lot more contrasting there. And maybe one more time. I am rinsing in between whenever I pull from my straight, from like just a pure color. I do rinse my brush in between because it keeps the color from getting contaminated. And there we go. To dull the yellow down, I add just a tiny bit of purple to a lot of yellow, apparently. Dioxazine purple is what I would call bossy. It is a bossy color. It is very demanding. But from that, we got this beautiful range of more muted neutral tones. Now, I personally love more muted tones, but that's one of the fun parts about working with brighter colors.
Laura Lynn says, add a touch of magenta.
Add a touch of magenta. Let's try it. I'm going to add a little bit of magenta to this. Ooh. I'm going to put it off to the side here. Maybe I needed to go a bit less magenta, or maybe we just need to add more. But look at that. That's kind of like a neutral red tone, like a tomato red almost. I like that. Let's just try blending the three of them and see what happens. Tonight is all about experimenting. So I am down for whatever in whatever discoveries you guys find or whatever questions you guys are interested in asking. Let's do it. All right. Let's mix all three. Ooh, I like that color. This is basically just a continuation of this color that we just did. It's just a little bit more balanced, I would say, a little bit more saturated. Of which, if it's too saturated and too deep, then you can just dilute it down a little bit. Just a little bit of Ooh, that's a beautiful soft color. I love that so much. Good call. So let's go ahead and try doing the red and the green. Now, because these are two mixed colors within this palette, there may be some differences as opposed to like finding mixing with just like true colors, like straight from the tube or a pan or whatever. But we're going to do this anyways, because these are already mixed colors. So let's just see what we find. They're so bright and colorful. Let's try this now. Mix just a little bit of green, a little bit of your red tone or magenta. You can try it with magenta. In fact, I'll probably do both because I want to see the difference. Ooh, this makes kind of like a neutral tint almost. Oh, there's my cat's hair. As per usual. It's like this is like a neutral tint color. That's nice. Now, it can sometimes, when looking at the bright colors right next to like all the muted tones, it can feel a little blah, it can feel a little unexciting. But I assure you, these like middle tones that are so necessary when making illustrations. All right, let's try green and just a pure magenta there. Ooh, this creates a purple. Mixing the green with the magenta, ooh, creates like a softer purple almost like a wisteria purple with a little bit more of a shadow. That's nice. I like it. And I'm just going to go ahead and put the magenta right here. What we're doing is we're building a combination sheet right here, because this will allow you to keep track of how you got to a specific color. You could actually fill whole books of combinations like this, just different colors that you use across different brands and whatnot, across any medium really. But I like that. All right, let's try with the blue and the orange. Now here we're dealing with another set of just pure pigments like here, whereas these two were mixed. So let's try it with the blue and the orange. Lay down our cyan color. And we're going to do a pure orange. I really like this orange. I'm actually really picky about the types of oranges that I like. because they can be so finicky with shadows sometimes. All right. Now that we have that, this is also really fun because I feel like a mad scientist in a lab. I'm like, you know, let's build all the combinations. Let's see what we do. Let's explore this. I don't make very beautiful swatch pages by any means. Some people make gorgeous swatch pages, but I just don't. All right, so now here is a fun fact about orange and blue. Typically, they're supposed to cancel each other out, and they do. But they, rather than always making a brown color, which is usually what you can rely on when mixing with opposite colors on the color wheel, sometimes they make a green, which is actually kind of nice because this is almost more of like a forest green or a viridian green, as opposed to the very bright kind of grassy green that we have mixing the yellow and the cyan. We get this nice, beautiful little forest green. Let's see what it looks like when it's more diluted. Ooh, that's a beautiful color. Love it. So that is something I didn't always know until more recently, is that when you add blue and orange together, it doesn't always make brown. Sometimes it makes a green, and so that can be really difficult. And I think it really has something to do with the types of pigments that you are using and the types of brands. But just know that is a possibility. So whenever you're mixing colors, make sure that you always swatch it ahead of time before directly applying it to your piece. And this gives you something to explore. Are these blues and oranges going to make a brown color or a green color? We don't know. So that is what a complementary palette does, is when you're looking for a palette and you choose complementary, it will always be the opposite of what is on the color wheel. Not when you get bigger color wheels, there's more shades. And so you'd match the shades of, you know, match the crimson shade to the viridian green, or the grass green to the vermilion red, or something like that. So you can always rely on the color wheel for that though. So the next type of palette is called an analogous palette. I can never pronounce that word, but basically what it means.
I can pronounce it.
Pronounce it, please do.
Yeah. Analogous.
Analogous. Okay, there we go. Thank you.
No problem.
Should have just asked. All right, so an analogous palette is dealing with colors. I'm going to use the actual color wheel that I have here. You're dealing with colors that are on the same end, like on the same quarter of your color wheel. And so for this one, we would have red, magenta, and purple. This basically it's supposed to be like a golden yellow, but I didn't mix it properly. So basically you would have a red, a orange, and a yellow. And when you start to get into more shades, the shades can also vary. It is different than a monochromatic, because monochromatic is dealing with one type of color, only blues, only purples, whatever it is. This is dealing with a small spectrum of colors. So pick a section of your color wheel, pick 3 colors. That can be orange, red, and purple. It can be yellow, green, and blue. It can be yellow, orange, and red. You pick, but pick a color or a palette of 3, and they all have to be on the same end of the color wheel, and just make a little swatch of the set of them. I'm going to go ahead. I liked the idea of the red, the magenta, and the purple. So we're going to do that. And I'm going to send you little squares. I started learning more about this palette from following an artist I admire, and they use a lot of analogous color palettes. Forever carefully pronouncing that name. Oh, I guess I reached for the orange. Oh, well, I guess I'm doing red, orange, and yellow, which is fine. And if you have time, you know, do another set. Do another set of the analogous color palette, but with different colors. Now these different types of color palettes can be really helpful when you are trying to figure out what to do for your piece. If you want it to have a cool tone, a kind of moodier feel to it, a lot of shadows and things like that, then you'd probably pick a palette more on the cool end of the spectrum, so more with blues and purples, rather than warmer tones. And if you want to indicate like something warmer, if you're trying to shoot for like a sunny day or something, then you shoot for that. And the idea for this is that you're only contained within those colors, and so it really helps to push your values really outside their comfort zone. So it kind of helps you to focus more on the values and less on the overwhelming amount of color. That's why I like using smaller color palettes, because I focus a lot more on how do I make this color palette work for what I need. And it helps a lot because we can be very easily overwhelmed by all the amounts of colors and art supplies that we have. So by having small ones like this, either it be a contrasting or an analogous or monochromatic, it really cuts down the choice factor of that. I'm doing one more here. I think this one right here might be kind of my favorite one because it's so it's kind of close but just different enough. Let's see what I mean here in a second once I add the purple to it. Remember that if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Do one last one here because we're so close to it. That just literally came full circle. And then with these colors, you can make your own shades. You can blend your own shades. And the beautiful thing about liquid watercolors is that it's so easy to mix and it's much easier to remember. This purple looks almost identical to the dioxazine. It's not quite. It does have a little bit of magenta in there. You can kind of see a big shade difference, but it is there. We have analogous color palette. Now, the last one that we have is called a tetratic color palette. And what that is dealing with is basically dealing with 4 corners. So basically, if you were to take a square, like just a square like this, where do your corners land? And so the corners land with purple, magenta, a golden orange or golden yellow, and a green. So let's gather that. I'm just going to go ahead and follow whatever that was right there that I just laid out with against my color palette. And we're just going to do 4 combination of 4 colors. And this is the tetratic, I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly, color palette. And we're going to have the purple. Going to have the golden orange or the yellow orange. It's not much different than just the straight from the bottle, but it's fine. It's still a mixture. And so what this also did is because of how my color palette is laid out with the types of paints that I have, I almost, oh no, there's 2 mixtures and two pure colors, which is kind of cool. And this itself could be a lovely palette to work with. Actually, honestly, if I were to go through this whole page and pick one, I'd probably pick a set like this, a tetradic palette, because I don't know, this just speaks to me a lot more. Really quick, I want to experiment for a second and see what happens when I mix the orange and the purple. And this is just fun. If you get an idea to mix a certain color, go for it. Oops. We'll see what this does. Now, this is not an opposite color, like a contrasting color palette or color combination at all. But let's see what this does real quick. Got this nice kind of plum color, which is one of my favorites. Reason being, I love to add things. It kind of is a tie-in color whenever I'm painting and using a palette. The plum type color really helps to kind of add some shadow, some depth, and whatnot. It's kind of close to this section right here, but yeah. So those are the different types of color palettes, and this is how you use the color wheel to get some of that. And the more that you practice with this, the more easily it's going to come to you that whenever you have colors, you're going to be like, how do I get a maroon color? And you'll know where to start to mix. And there's a lot more in-depth combinations. So like as you're mixing, you may decide, if I'm going to get a maroon color, first of all, I'm going to refill my palette because I've used up some of my colors here. I think it's mainly just the pure pigments there. But it's not as narrow as just adding one color with another color. Color mixing is a wide combination. We were just starting out small and not overwhelming ourselves right away. But you can add, over time, you'll start to see whenever you're trying to get a specific color, you'll be able to tell, you know what, I really like this green, but it's not yellow enough for me. I need to add a little bit more yellow to it because I need it to be warmer, or I need it to be cooler. So I need less yellow, more blue, things like that. I'm just going to take a moment to mix this one right here. So it's nice and good to go. So I want to see if I can mix a maroon color, a maroon color. I'm going to start by using the red mixture. I'm just going to start by using a red. Then we're going to add a little bit of purple. Remembering that purple is very, very strong. So I add little bits of purple at a time. So we're starting to get a little bit of a raspberry color, which is great. We wanted to deepen out just a little bit. I'm going to try adding a little bit of my ultramarine blue mixture, which starts to create it and make it more purple, which is totally fine. But I want it to have a little bit more of a maroon tone. So we're going to add a little bit of the red color again. Maybe I needed to add orange. That's okay. The red color has orange in it. And then from here, it's literally just kind of playing around with it until you get what you want. And then the more that you do that, the more familiar you get with the colors, the easier it will be to pull from your colors and be able to create your own, which nothing gives me more satisfaction than being able to mix my own colors. Now, I like that, but that's a little bit too brown, I think. So I'm going to add a little bit of magenta. But I would say that's a pretty good maroon color. All right. So now, what I think we're going to do, we're going to prep a page for our reverse coloring page. And what that means is we're going to be laying down some colors. So of the palettes that we just practiced with, I'd like you to pick a combination. It can be a contrasting, it can be a monochromatic, a analogous, or a tetradic. Or it can be a primary, or it can just be the full color wheel. But I would say pick a color scheme and go with that. I'm going to use the tetradic one because I like the combination on the other opposite ends of the spectrum of the color wheel. And I just think it sounds like fun. So getting a piece of paper, I'm not going to say we're going to use all of it. I'm probably going to use like half of it. Push this over. I'm going to use half my page here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start laying down color using from the 4 colors that we picked. So in order to not confuse myself, I'm just going to go ahead and lay out some color on a separate palette. Now, because we're dealing with liquid watercolors, which is very easy to mix because all you have to do is just drop it right in. That may be easy for liquid watercolors, but you may be wondering, what about like regular watercolors? What about tube watercolors? From there, what I would say is you can mix tube watercolors real easy, but be careful because you can mix, you think you're mixing just a little bit, but whenever you squeeze out paint from a tube, there's a lot, there's so much. So I would say if you do squeeze it and mix it, put it in like a pan or a section of palette that you don't have to use up right away. You don't have to get cleaned right away. And the reason for that is just to preserve your paint and save it. But most of the time, I just like to use a paintbrush. I like to use a paintbrush to kind of gauge how much I need. And I think I mentioned it in a previous tutorial. I kind of showed you the combination in the gemstone box. And I used dash marks with my paintbrush. And it was because that was how many times I loaded my paintbrush and added it in. So I hope that part makes sense. But whoops. With the straight colors, I can just add, I can just drop them right in. I did it with the others because those were mixtures with these. The magenta, my goodness, it gets everywhere. We're gonna get this purple going. Now that is the fun thing about liquid watercolors is that they can get everywhere. It's kind of fun. Because what's the point of being an artist if you're not going to get a little bit messy with it, right? So in order to do this, I'm just going to start by laying a little bit of water down, and I'm not even going to be trying to do like a ton of water. I'm just doing a little bit, starting with the corner. And we're just going to start to add it in. And I'm just going to start to like drop in some colors. This is a wet on wet technique. And just kind of like start to let it fan out. And when I start to get into the more dry ranges, I'm just going to start to kind of scrub it out or dab it out, kind of giving some texture. You can do like big sweeps, big washes of it if you like, but I'm just going to go ahead and start adding some colors. And I'm sticking with colors because I've got this triadic or this tetradic palette. I want to just kind of keep the colors that would normally be next to each other kind of together. And the reason for that is for blending quality. So this magenta and this orange are going to mix very nicely together. The purple and the orange may have a different effect, but we're going to go ahead and see. So we're just going to go ahead and start adding in some of this purple. And I'm adding a little bit more water as we go. Also, it's not bad with the orange. It dulls it down a little bit, but that's okay because we want to have a nice contrast of it. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of soften any white spots. Doesn't mean I'm going to get rid of them, but I'm just going to soften them a little bit. And kind of come back around to this magenta color. Just have fun with this part. Let this part just be free range fun. Just kind of see where you can do it. One of my favorite things is to just do complete wet on wet and see where the paint travels, because that's one of the best parts about watercolors is viewing where the paint travels. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more water here. We're just going to kind of let the paint travel here and see where we go. I'm going to go ahead and add the green here. And the best is whenever they can travel into each other. So I've got that pink going. And then while we wait for this section to dry, once we're done with this, we're going to go ahead and play with a couple of the other items in the box and kind of just get familiar with it. Go ahead and add some more purple down here. Just trying to blend it out. Just some more orange. And you're just I'm just kind of rotating with my colors. Now, if you're doing a monochromatic palette, this may be an interesting process, because if you have different shades of blue, it's great. And if not, you're still getting, it's probably the easiest, honestly, because you're just having to vary the shading application, the saturation application of the one single color. But somebody had mentioned a reverse coloring page, and I remember feeling so intrigued by it because I'd never heard of it. And I actually did see a book on Amazon about it. It's just a coloring book, but it's, you know, reverse style. And I thought it was very interesting and would be a lot of fun to try it out today, since this is just kind of an opportunity to play around with the box, get familiar with it, get familiar with the colors, and just have fun. So we're going to try that today. And the best part is you can overwork this with as much color as you want, or you could add as little color as you want. I think the main thing that you want to do is you want there to be some texture. So whether that be by adding just some blots or just letting the water kind of the colors play with each other on the page, just go for it. Just let them spread, bleed out. Let them do their thing. You've heard me say it before. I love watercolors because it looks like I had to spend a lot of time on one little area, and all I did was let the colors do their thing. I can be a very lazy artist at times, and so anything that can kind of do the work for me, I like it. I'm just going to soften this out. Now, the one thing is you definitely don't want it too dark. So you don't want it to have just solid straight from the bottle all over. You want there to be some varying contrast. All right, I'd say we're almost to the point. Now, the other reason I didn't do a lot of wet on wet, like starting with the whole page of water, is because I wanted to give this a chance to dry. So while this is drying, we're going to rotate our paper opposite direction. And I mean, this is just a fun exercise, so why not? And the reason for doing this is because I started on one half of the page and I want to be able to use the other half. So let's go ahead and fiddle with these other items that we have in the box. Now, you guys, we've played with round brushes, and we'll do a little bit of warm-up techniques with these, but I want to go ahead and talk about these two new items that are in the box. And the first one is this Art Graph water-soluble graphite pencil, which is super, super fun. Now, it works like a normal graphite pencil. This is exactly what you think it is. It works like a graphite pencil. You can sketch with it like a normal pencil. Just sketching a head because I always start with a head whenever I'm drawing. Little elf ears. You can kind of carry it down that way. But then you can also like add your shading. You can get a good value. You can start off really dark. Go ahead and blend it out, kind of lighten it as you go. You can hatch with it. You can kind of shade from its side. If you're a graphite artist, this is kind of like a great intro. It's basically combining graphite with watercolor, and you can just add a little bit of water, goes a long way. The fun part is the less water that you use to activate your graphite, the more concentrated it is. So the deeper value you will get. But the other thing that you can do is you can activate these with watercolor. And this can help create a deeper tone. It will be gray and it's going to look a little bit more muddy, but it's not a bad thing. This helps to kind of deepen out the contrast. This is kind of like the colored graphite that came in ArtSnacks box a few months ago. And already right there, that's a really great way to get a different tone in your work. Now by adding the orange, it just gets really muddy real fast. But the cooler tones tend to do really well, or like a red or something like that. Ooh, I love deep muted greens like this. Just that really almost that graphite type green. I love those. But yes, the less water that you add, the more concentrated it will be, less saturated, less diluted. There we go. And if you want it to be more diluted, you add a lot more water. This can also help with your shading. You can just kind of, because it will keep going and going and going. So you can just kind of really play into the shading with just a single stroke and just kind of drag it around. You can also add details on top of your watercolor. We're going to go ahead and use our palette page here. So why not? I'm going to do a little leaf. Leaves are always my default whenever I'm not quite sure what to do. The perfect little doodle element. And then we're going to take our little teeny tiny brush with just a small amount of water. We're really stealing with the damp brush here. We're just going to go ahead and just start to soften out those edges, kind of following the line work of it, but then letting it kind of fan out as it needs to. Put the maroon mix, added a tiny touch of yellow, lots of water for buff. Nice. Love it. I love it when we can find colors that already exist, but we've mixed them into the palette that we have on hand. It's awesome. All right. Now the other part is the Ecoline Duo Tip marker. And this has got two sides. Got a chisel tip and a fine tip. Now we have worked with watercolor markers before. We had a Faber-Castell watercolor marker come in before, but basically it's just kind of like mess-free watercolor. So watercolor markers are really great for traveling, and it is exactly as it sounds. It is a watercolor marker, which means that once you add water to it after laying it down, it just goes and goes and goes. Now this is a dye ink, so you'll notice a bit of a different what is it? You can notice a different dry effect on the color, but that's not a bad thing. This is just a really fun thing to explore and play around with. And I say that because if you've ever handled the Faber-Castell watercolor markers, you'll notice a difference, but it's not that much. More so just has to do with the longevity of it. But the Ecoline are really great for vibrancy, and that kind of goes really good with this box because of how vibrant the palette is itself. And you can also add watercolor to it. I'm going to add a yellow because we're dealing with a blue, so let's kind of see where it contrasts with. It starts to build a little bit of a green. Now, another thing that you can do with watercolor markers, oops, you take your palette, oops, and you can just scribble right onto it. And then by adding water straight to your palette, you now have an ink that you can just apply. You now have a watercolor paint that you can just apply directly as though you had one of these colors that is already in the palette. And they'll work, they'll play really well with your watercolors. Just add a little bit of purple, kind of a wet on wet technique right there, and they're just going to play nicely. I'm going to bring
Hey, Bree, this is Lee, just giving you a time check. We've got about 35 minutes left.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you. So yeah, this is what these items do. We're going to do a little brief warm up with the brushes, and then we're going to start with our reverse coloring page. So they're both round brushes. So what we're only going to need to practice one or two warm up techniques with this. And because they will apply to both. And so I'm just going to start with the Princeton Heritage. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start by adding just a straight line. I'm going to go a long ways here. Just going to go side. I'm using the side of my brush here, which gives a beautiful edge, but also like a rough tone there. So it doesn't have to be perfect. You can do this a couple of times to kind of practice. I'm working at a side angle here, which feels a little awkward to me right now, but it's not a big deal. I think I normally do it horizontal instead of vertical, but that's totally fine. And then what you can do a straight line. For those, I try to use more in my elbow. I try to guide it with my elbow, or my shoulder, I should say. Kind of just the whole arm, keeping my wrist straight, forearm straight, and just kind of letting it bend at the elbow, or even just using my whole shoulder into it. That gives you the best straight line. So go ahead and try making a straight line without using your wrists. Just use your elbow. Use your shoulder. I think that one was my elbow, but that works. That one was my shoulder. You can also do that for more curved lines too. And then what you can do is you can do the pressure points. But what that is that we're going to do a straight line, but we're going to add varying levels of pressure. I'm going to use the back of my swatch page here. We're going to use various levels of pressure. So you're going to start heavy and lift it up, be a little bit lighter, and then kind of go heavy again, lift it up, be a little bit lighter, a little bit thinner, kind of go back and forth, up and down like that. This helps you with brush precision. And it also just makes a really cool line. Now we're going to start really thin and kind of go deep. Start really thin and then go deep again. Just do that across the page. Just lifting it up as you go. Again, this really helps with brush control, line work control, and helps you to get a little bit more familiar with your brush. Last one, we're going to use the tiny one for this. We're going to do a little texture pattern. Now, if you took the gemstone classes last time, then you will be a little bit familiar with this. We're going to do these little dash marks. We're just going to do little dash marks, just kind of dotting, kind of alternating between them. I like to load my brush once and keep going until it fades out, because you just get this consistency of color, just kind of going back and forth, just dabbing, dotting, dashing, back and forth. And until it starts to fade out. And then at that point, you can even add a little bit of water to it just to keep it going a little bit further and help with the fade, get it a little bit more gradual. This is what I mean, the dioxazine purple, it's got a lot of punch to it. But this will keep going and going and going. And you can go a little bit faster. This is stippling. That's the word. Like a little stippling effect. But look at that. Look at that gradual transition right there. I love that. That's super satisfying. Good times. All right. I'm going to give a moment. And if you're playing around, practicing brushworks, things like that, go ahead and do that. And then I'll explain what we're going to do with the next step. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and just sharpen my pencil here. And this, you don't have to do this. This is just a preference thing. And we're going to start with a reverse coloring page, which I think is really, really fun. And so by now the paper should be dry. If your paper is still wet, you can still do this. I would say I cannot guarantee the results. But I'm using the Art Graph water soluble pencil, graphite pencil. We're going to start to lay in some details. Now, a couple of ways you can do this. One of my favorites is by following the clouded edges. And we're just going to kind of sketch around doing this little kind of like back and forth motions just to kind of keep it from being too straight. And we're just going to follow like kind of where the blooms are. And here's where we get like another deeper one. So I'm going to kind of like just follow where those are at. If you are really, I don't know what the word is, ambitious, creative, you might be able to find images in your piece, like in your lay of color, you might be able to find images. If you do, pull them forward. Actually, I see a hippo right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and round out my little hippo. Got little tiny ears, a big round nose. You got a little body. I think we did this for an ArtSnacks 20 years ago, and it was a lot of fun. I can't remember. I think hippos have tails. I don't really see a tail, but we're just going to add a tail. The question I never thought I would ask. Hippos have tails. I do believe they do, but when I think about it, I've only really ever seen hippos in the water. So, the little nose and little eyes. Weird enough, this looks like a crab claw. So we're going to go ahead and just kind of sketch it out there. If you don't see any images in your illustration, that's perfectly fine. What you can do is you can just kind of continue on, and you can even like have fun with it. Like this is basically a free-for-all. What you can do is you can have fun with it by just adding doodles of your own. Like one of my go-tos that I love to do is I love to do eyes when I'm not quite sure what to do. And so I don't see an eye here, but I'm just going to go ahead and add one because why not? And I'm just sketching with pencil. I think the pencil's really fun. I think typically with a reverse coloring book, people use pens, which you can absolutely use. But I thought it was actually kind of cool using this pencil. Eyebrow, because an eye is not complete without an eyebrow. I don't know what I see here, but I see a little creature. So we're just going to go ahead and sketch it forward. Sketch it forward so we can pull it forward. It's a little dinosaur. So this kind of page, you can get lost in it for a long time. At least I can. All right, so I've only got a couple of them there, but what I want to do now is I want to soften the edges. I'm going to use my tiny little paintbrush here. I'm just going to kind of go over where I've laid down my sketch and just start to activate the graphite. What this does is it's going to make it a little bit more predominant, a little less likely to move, like it won't smudge. You know. Go ahead and do the same thing with the eye up here. And this automatically is going to start to bring it out forward more. And I also want to do this because I actually want to give it some time to dry, because then I want to go and add some shadows with paint around my little sketches. I'm glad that I started with a small section here instead of doing a large full page. But this can be a really great exercise, especially if you're like on the go. Just have a page of watercolor. And this is a great way to use up leftover watercolor. Like just fill a page with leftover watercolor, let it be all kinds of colorful and whatnot. And then just have a pencil or a pen with you and just fill it out. You can just start to fill out things. This would also do really well if you have like a travel water brush. Just have this pencil, travel water brush, and a piece of paper that's covered in leftover watercolor. This makes a really great activity. Like I'm thinking waiting rooms, things like that. Makes it really, really fun and easy. Now I do have my crab claw right there. It also helps you keep an eye ahead of your brush or looking at your brush type. Ooh, for like the lines going forward, that makes a lot of sense. I think I've started applying that technique, applying that method with some of my line work, even just digitally. And I think I've been noticing a difference. So thank you for pointing that out. If you basically demonstrate it real quick. If I want to get here, but I'm starting here, kind of like keeping an eye about where I'm going, which you can't really tell because I can't tell where my eyes are shifting, but it works great if you have a point on your paper. So like if there's like line work or something that you're trying to meet, it helps. And I'm just softening the edges for these little blurry motions right there. Okay, so now that I'm going to start circling around, with my colors. I'm taking my tiny brush here because we got tiny little illustrations, and I'm going to just start going in and adding some shadows to it. I'm going to be using slightly diluted. I want it to be a slightly diluted color. All it is just little shadows and maybe less pigment than water, higher water ratio. It gives it a softer shadow blend. Yeah. And it starts to bring the sketches, the images in just the paint forward a lot more. I'm really proud of this little hippo. He makes me happy. I'm going to do the same with the little dinosaur. Start to add a little layers of shadows, more water than pigment.
Hey, Bree, a couple comments here in the chat. Laura Lynn, learn the keep your eye ahead of you. Learn that in quilting. Keep your eye ahead of the needle and you will get a much better line work. So she applied that to art. And then she said, the blue paint worked very light, makes a beautiful sky color.
Ooh, yes. I know somebody had suggested hot air balloons for this box, like using hot air balloon as a subject matter, which I think is really fun actually. And I thought that blue would be perfect for the sky. So I'm glad that you feel the same. I think cyan blue is just really, it's a really nice color. It's a soft, easygoing blue color. Now for this eye up here, what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to be shading around it because the white of the eye should be like, it should be the lightest part, but because we don't have white there, we're just going to go ahead and use our color. We're just going to start to add shadows around it. So we're going to deepen out all the colors around it, kind of like focusing on the negative space. Focusing on the negative space. To kind of hopefully bring that illustration forward more. And if you go over, you can always emphasize more with paint rather than just letting the sketch stand alone. Sketch is there to kind of mark where the lines are at, but beyond that, do whatever you like.
Jennifer votes for hot air balloons too.
Nice. Okay. We have votes for hot air balloons. I think it'll be a fun illustration. I like the idea. Thank you for that input. Yes, if you are tuning in, this is your first time interacting with the Watercolor Snacks community. Over on the mixed group, I added a question last week asking what are some things you were interested in learning about using this box. So feel free to drop all your suggestions and ideas in there because I do pull from it and I do use it for inspiration. So if you think of anything, whether it be sooner or later on in the quarter, feel free to drop it in there. I'm going to use a green color for the irises. Now my pencil marks are not as saturated as I'd like them to be. So I need to deepen out the colors somehow because it's just kind of getting a little bit lost. And you don't have to wait till it's fully dry, but do keep in mind that if you apply your art graph pencil onto a wet surface, it will activate directly on the tip. It's not a bad thing, but I would say just be careful that you don't get the wood wet because that can affect the overall structure of the pencil. I'm going to use a very little amount of water just to activate that right there. And then we have a more deeper kind of grayish dark color line work. I'm glad. I hope this this class has been helpful. I like to have some sessions where at least 1 or 2 sessions where we can just kind of like enjoy playing around with the box. I always like to have at least 1 session at the beginning of the quarter where we're just kind of getting introduced to the supplies, getting used to them, more familiar with them. I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit of shadow to our crab claw here. It's looking a little lonely. Everybody else is getting shadows except him. There's a random crab claw, why not? There's no end product for this piece, by the way. Like this little exercise, there's no like finished, complete, it's done. It's just an opportunity to play around. I'm very, very happy with that hippo, though. I will say that. I'm very happy with that hippo. Very much so. And if people would like to today, we could always, you're welcome to share your piece, your swatch page, or your color swatches, anything like that is welcome. I see a couple mushrooms right there, so I'm just adding some. Oh, I see a little caterpillar. Reminds me of a Adventure Time caterpillar for sure.
Hey Bree, we have some comments. Let's see, more people voting for hot air balloons. Love the
All
colors.
right.
They're thanking you for this playtime. It's perfect. Lauren,
Awesome.
it just makes all my colors together, and that equals black. Very cute hippo, everyone says.
Oh, really? Okay, now I kind of want to mix all the colors to see what it makes. I haven't actually tried mixing all of them together.
I do have a personal request here.
Okay.
I do see the hippo. It is very cute. Can you bring it closer to the camera so we can see exactly how cute it is?
Look how cute that hippo is.
Very cute. It's a shy hippo. Yes, very cute.
It is a shy hippo. I think it's a curious hippo. This looks very curious, very, very attentive.
Yes, the hippo's like, oh, where am I? What's going on here?
All right, what is this crazy world? I love it. Okay, I want to mix all the colors real quick because I want to see what that does. Like, honestly, there are so many combinations. In fact, after this class, and there's no timestamp on this, but like just throughout the quarter, feel free to post your most interesting color combination. Like that would be something I'd love to see. Because I feel like the possibilities are just endless. I am pulling from the dropper directly just to get the equal, like just an equal mixture, and also the purest form. Mixing one drop of every color. See what we get. Moment of truth. Oh my. Okay, so it will look one way on the palette, but it doesn't always translate when we apply it to paper. So let's do this. I'm gonna do a swipe. Ooh. That is a good black. I was not expecting that. I love it. It's like a bluish black, but honestly, dealing with such bright colors, I prefer not like a true black, like a true lamp black. I prefer a black color that has a bit of a tone to it. Oh, that's awesome. Which means you could probably line work with that. I am somebody that uses line work for a lot of things. So let's try line work real quick. Use our tiny little brush here. We're just gonna go ahead and see what we get. Ooh. Love this about color mixing. There's so many discoveries to be had. I know for a long time, I used to look at the bright color palettes and be very uninspired by it. Like whenever I would go and buy a palette, it's like you get your primaries, you know, maybe a couple of other colors. And I always was very turned off by it. I was like, I don't want this. These are not the colors I imagine in my head. But they do that for a reason. And that's because it's the color in its purest form. And as long as you have that, your possibilities are endless. I hope that this session today has really opened up a new world of just color mixing in general. I didn't do equal. No worries. No, I like to take advantage of the dropper aspect while I can, because not all the water, in fact, most watercolors that I work with are not liquid. It's kind of rare and kind of fun and different to work with liquid watercolor. For a change, it's really, really, really fun. Now I wanted like, let's do the CMYK combination. This is basically the CMYK color. We have cyan, we've got magenta, and we've got this lemon yellow, which is basically all the colors for CMYK minus the black. But I want to just mix these colors to see what they do when you mix the three of them equal parts. Again, it's just mixing with the little dropper mad scientist aspect. This looks like a really interesting blue green. Ooh, oh, that's a beautiful blue. It's like a peacock blue. It's a very muted blue, but I like muted. It's a deep blue. I could see this being used for like an ocean. And the thing about this palette is that these combinations are not typically ones I would pull for or even know to pull for. So I'm excited because I'm going to be learning a lot just from playing around with the colors for this box. All right, Lee, should we open it up for show and tell for anybody that wants to?
Yeah, I was just gonna suggest that. We have
Okay.
about 10 minutes left.
Cool.
So if you want to share what you've been working on, you can turn on your camera or raise your virtual hand, whatever you prefer, and I can bring you to the table and you can share what you've been working on. If not, totally fine. You can
Never obligated to share.
keep working. But if you're proud of something that you made during this session, even if it's not complete, that's another opportunity to share what you're proud of.
I just love to see what people do because everybody's results are so drastically different. It's just beautiful to see.
Yeah, that's one of the fun things about ArtSnacks, watercolor snacks, art journal snacks is that everyone is receiving the same materials for that particular box. And even though there are guided live stream sessions, everyone has their own style and the way that they make marks, and it's really it's fascinating considering everyone has the same materials.
Oh yeah.
Laurelyn says, I'll snap a pic and put it on ArtSnacks Mix. Totally fine.
Perfect.
Totally fine.
That's awesome.
You're ready.
Yeah, no worries. If nobody wants to share, that's totally okay.
Oh, we have one person, Genevieve. Hold on one sec. Let me spotlight you. Boom. There you go.
Oh my gosh. That's so pretty. I love that.
If you want to turn on your sound and tell us about your piece, you're welcome to.
I don't know. This is what I made.
I love
It's a lot of fun. I really.
Is it just the? Oh my gosh! Look at your tetratic palette right there. That's beautiful. That perfect
Thank you.
square. Ah, that's so satisfying.
This was a lot of fun. This was my first one, so this was super fun.
Yay! Welcome.
Okay, so about your piece, is that just like the reverse coloring page style? Like you just laid down color?
Yeah,
just
so I
followed it?
used this one, that
Okay.
palette, and then did like you did, and then I made a bunch of flowers.
Oh my gosh, I love it. That's amazing. And like your values with there is, it looks like a planned piece. That's brilliant. I love it so much. Thank you for sharing.
Of course.
That was awesome.
That's wonderful.
Let's go back to see if there's anyone else that wants to share. Thank you for sharing. Let's see. I'm looking to see if anyone has their hand up or looks like they're open to sharing. If not, totally fine. Oh, Laurelyn, yeah.
No,
I
no,
was
not
getting you
Laurelyn.
there. All right, hold on. Let's replace. There you go. You can feel free to turn on your sound and talk and share and whatever.
Okay, well, I didn't mean to put my hand up.
I mean, you kind of did, but you didn't.
You don't have to.
All
Laurelyn,
right,
it's
I'll
okay.
just, this is the one I'll share.
Oh yeah.
Oh gosh, I love
I'm-
it.
I'm not sure if I got the tetronic right, but I am gonna go and Google just all the color
Yeah.
knowledge, just to have that knowledge. You know, of
Just
course, I could
Google-
rewatch this and be able to get that knowledge.
Just search color wheel palettes and it'll give you a list and they'll explain it a little bit better than I can. I'm just kind of fumbling over my words, but I have the
Okay,
idea in mind. Yeah, no, I love that. And you got some really beautiful combinations in your swatch page there, which
you.
I didn't know were possible. It's so fun.
Well, the buff, I was thinking, you know, I always want to get a good buff and a good maroon. After I
Ooh,
think
yeah.
you and Sarah talked about it, then I said,
Mhm.
I have to do this. So
There you go.
develop the colors, you know, so, all right, that's it. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you, guys.
for sharing.
Thank you. Yeah. I think that's what's so great about this session is you're just kind of exploring. You're just kind of like seeing what colors make sense for you and getting ideas. And I love that exploration with was it reverse coloring? Is that what you called it?
The reverse coloring page. And we
Yeah.
owe thanks to that for somebody in the mix group for suggesting that, because I didn't even know that was a thing. And this is like opening a whole new world of ideas and just like creative play. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just like kind of just you don't really have to think about planning a piece. It just kind of happens, and then you pick out what you see when the paint dries. I think it's brilliant. Really nice.
So awesome.
Still got like about 4 or 5 minutes. If you want to share anything, anybody, we're open to it. Bree, you want to talk about what you're thinking about for next class or
Well,
whatever?
now I'm thinking about hot air balloons for our next class.
Yes. Yeah.
Because there has been a very positive response for hot air balloons. And you know what? We've never done it before. I think it's a great piece. We're going to be doing small illustrations because our brushes are pretty small. So we're just going to be working within the size of our brushes. But that's totally fine because I feel like it allows for easier dry time, easier application. Yeah, but I'll be working on hot air balloons for next session.
Very cool. All right. So if no one else wants to share, we can end it 2 or 3 minutes early here. Thanks everyone for joining us on this Thursday.
Thank you so much.
And if you worked on something and you want to share it in a more complete piece, feel free to share it on the mix group. And we'll get this recording up sometime tomorrow. And thank you everyone for joining us. Really appreciate it. We'll see you next time.
Bye now.